Parsha. Yes. So, Parshas Behaalosecha this week. One of the big things in the story of the Parsha this week is the story of the manna, the food that kept us alive and nourished in the desert. Right? A desert is a place where obviously there's no agriculture. Finding food is difficult, and so for the duration of our time in the desert traveling from Egypt to Eretz Yisroel, there was man. Food from heaven, bread from heaven. Now, there are several things about the man that we're going to discuss. First of all, just nutritionally, the man was perfectly nutritious. It was 100% nutrients. Right? Food we eat today has nutrients in it. Hopefully, we're eating foods that have the macronutrients that we need, the right amounts of the right kind of fats and proteins and carbohydrates, the right micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, etc., coenzymes, whatever it is that we need. Hopefully, we are getting that in our food. But the fact is, the food that we eat, in addition to all of those things, contains a lot of just waste matter, as evidenced by the fact that a lot of it needs to be gotten rid of after we eat. So the man, in contrast, was 100% nutrients. There was zero waste. Every single gram, I would say molecule, but I'm not sure if that's how it works, but let's call it molecules. Every single molecule, every gram of man that was consumed was absorbed and used. There was no waste. There was no waste that needed to be dealt with afterwards because there was no part of the man that didn't contribute towards our nutrition, the nourishment of our bodies. So the man was zero waste, 100% nutrients. The man also technically didn't require any preparation. Right? One of the reasons why, in very stark contrast to the man, a lot of, let's say the standard American diet, which is atrocious for health. The reason why it is the standard American diet, why a diet that is so bad for our health has become so standard and so common is basically, if you wanted to, there are a few things. A huge part of it is just efficiency. It's quick, relatively quick to eat. You can make, first of all, there's the taste factor. That being said, you can make delicious, very healthy, nutritious food. But to make delicious tasting food that's actually good for our health, good for us to eat, takes a lot more time than buying a Danish or, whipping up a batch of chocolate chip cookies. How long does it take to make 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 calories worth of chocolate chip cookies? How long does it take to make 10,000 calories worth of healthy, nutritious food? In general, it's way more time, way more effort to make healthy, nutritious food. So many people will tend to eat lots of food that's not very good for our health. But all food requires preparation. I guess you could maybe technically survive for a period of time on just fruits and veggies that are raw, but food requires preparation. And generally, the more satiating a food is, that let's say, more or less, the more preparation it's going to require. The man, in contrast, was delivered ready to eat. There was no preparation necessary, technically. Now, what we see when the Torah tells us about the man, we see, did the camera steal your spot? It's going to make me uncomfortable to see you like that the whole time. Unless you're comfortable. If you're comfortable like that, then I'm good. But if you're going to be like half in, half out the whole time and not comfortable.
I didn't want to make noise.
So, thank you for making yourself more comfortable. So the Torah describes the delivery of the man in different ways. One of the ways that it describes it is that it says, and when the dew fell in the camp in the morning, dew would settle on the ground, it would condense on the ground, and then the man would descend upon that blanket of dew that had condensed upon the ground in the camp, which means that the man fell in the camp among the tents, among the residents of the Jewish people in the desert. It also says, and they went out of the camp to collect the man. They exited the camp to go collect the man. And then it also says, and they journeyed or traveled to collect the man. Three very different things. And the reason is because different people received different kinds of delivery of man. There were people whose behavior warranted that Hashem would deliver the man to them on their doorstep. So, in describing delivery of the man to those people, the Torah says, and the man descended in the camp, because there were people for whom they would come to the front flap of their tent and unzip it. I don't think they had zippers, but they would open the flap of the tent and the man was sitting there waiting for them in the morning. Then there were people whose behavior and lifestyle warranted that they might need to put in a little bit more effort to get them on, and their man landed outside of the camp. And then there were people whose behavior and lifestyle warranted that they should have to put in more work to get them on, and it should take more time for them to get it. And so their man fell distant from camp and they had to actually travel. So these are three groups that the Torah is talking about. It says, and the man descended in the camp. It also says, and they exited the camp. And then it says, and they traveled or journeyed to get them on. So these are three different groups. These three groups also, not only was the location of the delivery different, but the contents of the delivery were different. All three got man. Some of them, the ones who received the man at the doorstep in the camp, generally received their man ready to eat. The ones who had to go outside of the camp to collect their man just outside of the camp, they received their man more or less ready to eat. And the term that's used is like loaves, as though it's loaves of bread that have been, mixed and kneaded and prepared and just need the final step to complete the preparation to eat, like a loaf of bread that's, the hard part of making bread, the labor-intensive part of making bread, and if you enjoy baking, the fun and interesting, exciting part of making bread is not putting it in the oven and setting a timer and then taking it out. It's the mixing, it's making sure the ingredients are doing what they're supposed to do, it's the portioning and the kneading and the braiding and all the other different things that are the interesting and, for some people, fun part of baking bread. So there were people, but it's also the labor-intensive part. It's the part that if you owned a bakery that you were running to make profit, not for fun, that's the part you would love to not have to do, because that costs a lot of time and labor. So the middle group, the group who didn't get them on at their front doorstep, but they had to go just outside the camp, not too far, they got them on, with most of the hard work done, and it's like a loaf of bread, you just got to stick it in the oven. You still have to do your part, but it's not quite ready to eat, but most of the hard work's done. And then there's a group and then it also describes and says that they would grind it, etc. There was one group that had to really go through a whole process of preparing them on. This was the same group that had to travel, to journey to get them on. And then they had to go through a whole process, as if someone making bread would have to start grinding the wheat. And if you have to make a loaf of bread to eat for breakfast, and what you get to work with is like whole kernels of wheat that are not ground, you've got your work cut out for you before you get to eat. That's what it was like for the third group. Right, so we see here that the man fed everybody. There was a real spectrum here of people who received man. Now, it's true that some of them had to work in order to get them on, but in a sense, it's almost like the reverse of the way it is with physical food, right? So, and the man is referred to in the Torah as, in different places, there are different variations, it's referred to as lechem min hashamayim, bread from heaven, right? When we eat bread now, we make a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe. And what are we thanking Hashem for doing? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings bread out of the ground. And there are commentaries and opinions among the sages who say that when they would eat man, they would actually make a bracha that would say, Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim, he who brings bread from heaven. Because that's ultimately what it was, and the Torah actually refers to it as that. Lechem min hashamayim, bread from heaven. So the difference between bread from heaven and bread from the ground, really essentially like the difference between anything from heaven versus anything from the ground. Anything that's natural, anything that's a part of the natural material universe has positives and negatives. It has parts of it that are valuable and parts of it that are wasteful. Everything we do requires sorting and processing, filtering, selecting, preparation, etc. And all food that we eat contains within it things that we don't need, perhaps things that are not good for us, some more than others. And the man in contrast, and so there, the reason we have to prepare food is because naturally the resources, as they are not in a condition in which it's really ready to eat. And so we have to sort, filter, prepare, process to make it ready to eat. As opposed to the man, the most natural form of the man was pure nutrition ready to go. And because some people didn't deserve that, Hashem offered it up in a way in which they had to do work to get it ready. But not because the man, it's not like the man really needed this whole process, but Hashem was really nice and took care of that for some people. It's the man naturally, in its natural state, was pure nutrition ready to eat. Now, even the people who had to go out and collect them on, and they had to do the grinding and the processing and all of this work in order to make it ready to eat. What it doesn't say anyway, so we have two things that the Torah tells us about the difference between the groups. Where the delivery arrived, outside the door, outside the camp, or far away, and how it was delivered. Was it ready to eat? Was it almost ready to eat? Or was there a lot of work that still needed to be done? It doesn't say anything anywhere in the Torah about some people's man being less nutritious than others. It doesn't say anything that for some people their man came with waste and some people's man was pure nutrition, because it wasn't. Man was 100% nutrients. There was nothing in anybody's man that didn't contribute towards, that didn't nourish their physical health and well-being. The man was 100% unadulterated, pure, healthy nutrition for everybody, regardless of who they were, regardless of the lifestyle they lived, regardless of their behavior, regardless of what they thought, said, or did. The man was 100% pure nutrition for everybody. And everybody who ate man got what they needed from it. Now, keeping in mind this distinction between the man, the bread from heaven, and bread from the ground, natural, regular, material food, this gives another layer of meaning to halachically, right? Every Shabbos, we read a Torah portion. There's a Torah portion, a portion of the week that we read in Shul on Shabbos from the Torah. And if someone's not in a Shul, they don't have a Torah, we can read it from a Chumash. But there is a designated portion for every week. Now the halacha is, what it says in Shulchan Aruch, if someone finds himself in a place where, let's say someone's traveling and they've lost track of time and they have no way to know what the Parsha is this week. For example, it's Shabbos, they want to read the weekly Torah portion, they have no way to find out what it is. What do? So the halacha is, sorry?
Google.
Not on Shabbos. So maybe if you have Alexa and she's not Jewish, you're allowed to ask her to look it up for you. No, but you wouldn't be allowed to. Just to be clear, by the way, for the record, because I said that, very important to note that the halachas, what's called Amir al-Anochi, asking someone who's not Jewish to do something for us on Shabbos that we're not allowed to do ourselves, those halachas are taken generally by many, many people so far out of context and they're abused wildly. In the vast majority of situations, if you can't do something, if you're not allowed to do something yourself on Shabbos, you're not allowed to ask someone to do it for you just because they're not Jewish. Almost all the time. Now, there are exceptions. There are numerous exceptions, but they are exceptions. The rule is, if you can't do it yourself, not only can't you ask someone else to do it for you just because they're not Jewish, if they do it with the intention to benefit you, you're not even allowed to. If you're sitting in a room and you're reading and the sun's setting and it's starting to get a little dark, and someone who's not Jewish walks in and sits down next to you with a book and they're reading and they're like, they notice it's getting dark, they get up, they turn the light on, they come back down and continue to read, you're good. If this person's walking past the room and they peek in and they see you reading and they see it's getting dark and they turn on the light switch for you and then they keep walking, you're not allowed to read in that room anymore. You have to leave. Because this person turned on the light for you on Shabbos. You didn't ask them to, you didn't hint to them, nothing. They did it of their own initiative. You're not even allowed to benefit from something they did of their own initiative because they did it with the intent to help you.
And if you say,
yeah.
would you like to turn on the light?
That almost never makes any difference. That's another thing that it's like, there's like one niche case where the halacha is you're kind of allowed to, it's better to hint if possible, and all of a sudden everybody thinks you're allowed to ask anyone who's not Jewish to do whatever you want as long as you hint. And then the hint becomes, I'm not really allowed to, and I would really like it if you did, so if you would do it, it would make me really happy, and you basically end up just asking them to do something for you that you're not allowed to even benefit from them if they do without you asking, let alone hinting, let alone asking directly, which people end up doing when the hint doesn't work. So that's just for that, just to make sure that little joke about Alexa doesn't, get taken out of context and cause someone to do something they don't want to do.
What if before Shabbos you agree with someone that when it's dark they have to turn the lights?
Sketchy.
Or with the air conditioning, it's gonna affect everyone that is in the house.
When it comes to something like air conditioning, it becomes more complicated because it could affect people's health. So if you have people who are not of robust health, children, people who are elderly, or if it's just going to be so hot that it's actually going to be unhealthy for anybody, then that's different. Because as soon as you're asking a non-Jew to do something on Shabbos that you're not allowed to do, and they're doing it to take care of the well-being of someone who's unwell, that becomes different. Then you're allowed to. And if it's so hot that it's like unsafe, unhealthy to be inside without air conditioning, or if it's okay for most people, but there are children, people who are weak, whatever it is, then it's different. Then you'd be allowed to, most likely, generally. But if it's just like, it would be really nice if it was 4 degrees cooler in here, not so simple. I mean, basically, no. So, but there are many, many exceptions, but it's important for people to realize they're the exceptions, not the rule. Now, back to what we were saying before we got distracted by Alexa. If someone's in a place on Shabbos where in a situation where they don't know what Torah portion to read, the halacha is that we read the part of the Torah that talks about the man, the delivery of the man. Why? One of the explanations that's given is, because it's called Parshas Haman, this part of the Torah that describes the falling of the man, was said on Shabbos. So we read it on Shabbos and we're reading a part of the Torah that was definitely said on Shabbos. Okay, kind of. You could maybe get away with that.
Could it also be though, because there was nothing of the man that was extra that would be wasted, it's that gives us everything we would need for Shabbos if we don't have the actual portion? Kind of like how the man was replacing actual food?
I'm not quite getting what you're saying.
So the man in the desert, right? The people didn't have actual food. It was a desert. So Hashem gave them exactly what they needed, all the nutrition they needed in that one thing. And it covered everything, right? So you're saying that if someone's in a place where they don't know what Parsha it is for Shabbos, they are allowed to read the Parsha with the man.
Well, you're allowed to read anything, but the ideal Parsha to read is the man.
So if the ideal Parsha to read is the man, and that completely covers you, you've done the mitzvah then is that...
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Could it be there's nothing extraneous in that?
You're heading in the right direction, yes. But the reason that it was said on Shabbos is like, okay, I guess if you have to come up with something, maybe that'll do. But there were lots of other Torah portions that were said on Shabbos. You know what else was said on Shabbos? Aseret Dibros, 10 Commandments on Har Sinai. How about that? They're pretty fundamental. You know, it can never hurt to read those an extra time. Why, out of all the Torah portions that were said on Shabbos, the one about the man? There has to be something more to it than just the fact that it was said on Shabbos. Because if it's just that, there are many Torah portions that were said on Shabbos, including the Aseret Dibros. So if the Aseret Dibros was said on Shabbos, the 10 Commandments was said on Shabbos, and the Parsha of the man, the story of the man or the description of the man was said on Shabbos, if we're going to choose one of those two because it was said on Shabbos, you're going to need a reason that you're choosing the one about the man rather than the 10 Commandments. And there is a reason. And this ties back into exactly what we were saying. We are here. Why are we here? We are here to integrate divinity into the world through the words we speak, through the thoughts we think, and through the things that we do. We are here to elevate the world, to uplift the world, to take a mundane world and make it divine. Now, when we say uplift the world, that doesn't mean to change the world from what it is. It means to take the world as is, not to destroy it, not to change it, but to make it no longer mundane because we have integrated divinity into it. So the world is what it is. It has just become uplifted because it has had divinity, it has had godliness integrated into it. That's what we are here to do. Now, there are a number of different ways to do this, and in general, we could kind of divide this into the weekday approach and the Shabbos approach. During the week, what does a regular person's life look like? And I mean, this is going to be very clear in the difference between what a Torah observant person's life looks like during the week and what a Torah observant person's life looks like on Shabbos. What does a Torah observant person's life look like during the week? It looks like all kinds of mundane things. It usually looks like, often will look like some kind of work, all kinds of mundane things that maybe we rather not be involved in if we didn't have to. And Shabbos, so the way that we integrate divinity into the world during the week is, by this long process of integrating, working with the world on its terms, living a very worldly life, living life on terms of the world and sort of having to sneak divinity into it. Now, when I say on the world's terms, to be clear, I don't mean the world's priorities as opposed to Shabbos, as opposed to the Torah's priorities. We have to live life on Torah's terms, but during the week, we are doing that in a way that takes the terms of the world into account, as opposed to Shabbos. On Shabbos, we don't go to work. On Shabbos, if we look at all the things that are prohibited on Shabbos, the 39 malachas, right? What do they call 39 malachas? 39 types of work. They're creative work, ways of making creative changes. And many of them are classified as being steps in the process of producing bread, plowing the ground, sowing seeds, watering, nurturing things that grow, harvesting the grain, separating, threshing, all of those different things that are necessary to get it from wheat that was harvested to wheat that's ready to be ground. Then the grinding and kneading dough. All of these things are forbidden on Shabbos. Baking, etc. Question?
Yeah, I really agree with you what you say about that we should deal with this material world. And I have the same opinion. But what I see very often the Jews trying to hide themselves from the temptations, just to throw away the phone, like to surround yourself only by religious people, and just they try to avoid all the connection with this real world. And you just feel like it's two worlds, and what is the real, what is not. I see that some people are trying to involve more non-religious people and deal with them, and they know how to behave like a Jew, being not in Jewish society. But some Jews and a lot of Jews trying just to stay in your comfort zone and don't deal with it. But I'm staying holy, but I'm in my comfort zone and I don't want to deal with that world. But we should transfer that world into the spiritual.
Okay, good. That's a good and a very important question. That, just to answer that, should really be a whole class. But I'll try to sort of give you a general idea as briefly as possible to address that. So there are a few different parts to that, to clarifying that issue. Number one is, for the community as a whole to be healthy as a community, we do need to have different people doing different things. Right now, most of the people should be getting out, interacting, engaging. We do need to have some people who just sit and study Torah all day, because when we have a question, we need to have someone who sits and studies all day that we can ask, for example, right? If everyone in the world was a professor, the world would be entirely dysfunctional. But if we didn't have any academics, we'd also have a problem, right? So we do need some people who are just immersed completely in Torah study and prayer, and are very, very deeply immersed in the more spiritual side of things, because they can be that rock that we can anchor ourselves to, and that we can get guidance and reminders of priorities and things as we interact with the world, answers to questions. That's one thing. Another thing is, for the rest of us, I would say there are two different places it could be coming from. One is, some people are missing the point. Some people are missing the point that Hashem put us here to uplift the world, and they rather just, sit in their corner. And it's a very common mistake. Now, to be fair, if someone's going to make a mistake and have messed up priorities or incorrect priorities, they could make a bigger mistake than that, right? There are people whose mistake in their priorities is bigger than running away from the material world to be immersed in spirituality. Many people run away from the correct, healthy life to worse things. So, is it incorrect? Yes. To be fair, it's among the better mistakes someone could make, let's say. But another part of that is also that not everybody can engage with every part of the world, right? For a number of reasons. Different people, first of all, have different gifts and different things to offer the world. Different people also have different weaknesses. Let's say, for example, I'll give you one example that I think really will illustrate this very clearly. There's such a thing as called Chabad on campus, right? Which is shluchim who go to bring Torah Judaism to college students on campus. Now, college students on campus are a huge number of Jewish people that need Torah and mitzvahs. They're in a environment in which if someone's not, many of them, probably most of them, if someone's not working very hard to bring them Torah values and, and Torah true Judaism in that environment, there are a lot of other things that are screaming very loud at them. And that's not a good situation to leave someone in. So it's a very important, let's say, opportunity or responsibility that someone needs to be catering to those students and giving them Torah true Judaism while they're there. Right? Would it be a good idea for every single person to go and do that? Absolutely not, because there are many people who are maybe a shliach, maybe they're a person who wants to dedicate their life to, to sharing Torah true Judaism. They're also human. They also have weaknesses like everybody else does, and some people's particular weaknesses make living on a college campus as a full-time job a very, very unhealthy idea. Right? So is that something that should be done if there are people who have the strength and groundedness and fortitude to do it? Absolutely yes. Are there many, many people for whom it's absolutely the right thing to say, not for me, I'm not going there? Also absolutely yes. Right? So at the same time as we are here to integrate divinity into the world, uplift the world, and all of those things, which requires that we do interact with the world, We're only going to be integrating divinity into the world and uplifting the world if we interact with it in a way that is true to Torah. And if I have weaknesses that mean that in a particular environment, there's a relatively high risk that I'm going to end up living or behaving in a way that's not true to Torah, then by interacting with that environment, I'm not going to be uplifting it, or at least I might not be uplifting it. There's a risk that it's going to pull me down instead of me lifting it up, which means it's not a good idea for me to go there. Right? There are many situations, many places in the world, many, environments or circumstances where there are people who could be helped with Torah and mitzvahs, but the halacha is absolutely that no one's allowed to go there and do that, because it's a place that no person should be in. There's someone Jewish there who maybe could really use some inspiration and connection to Torah and mitzvahs. Okay, but you can't go in, right? And then also there's sort of an in-between, maybe some areas that are, let's say, maybe gray-ish, areas where, let's say, I'm fine, I know I can go there, I know it's not going to be a problem for me. But any, let's say, Torah observant, conventional, Orthodox Torah observant Jew would look at me going there and be like, oh my goodness, how could you go there? Right? Now, assuming it's a place that the halacha says I'm allowed to go, it's a place that I'm allowed to be, but most people would look at me and be like, hang on a second, like Orthodox people don't belong there. It's like, well, hang on a second. Is there necessarily a reason why I shouldn't be there? Is it true that this place is not ideal in general and maybe there's no reason why a regular Orthodox person should be there unless they're going there for a specific reason? Yeah, that might be true. And their objection might be coming from a good place, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I should go. The fact is, yes, I should go if I can and there's no reason not to. But their concern, or the fact that they feel like, hang on a second, that's not a place where Torah observant people belong, might be a valid position. It's just that they haven't necessarily broken it down all the way and said, well, hang on a second, is there benefit to be gained by going there? Is there someone you can help? And is there any real reason why you shouldn't go there even if there's someone that needs your help? Or is it just sort of a general feeling that like Orthodox people don't belong there? And they might both be true at the same time. And then you have to do an analysis of which one is correct in this situation for this person. Right? So it's not so simple. Number one is, yes, some people make mistakes. And again, it's among the smaller mistakes. Some people, we collectively need for some people to be really immersed in that world and separated from the world. And then, and there are some people, let's say there might be a person who, let's say, just is born with, a 10 out of 10 level of temptation for like all the bad things. Right? And this doesn't make them a better or worse person. This is the nature Hashem created them with. They crave non-kosher food. They crave all the kinds of fun a person's not allowed to have according to halacha. They crave doing everything that the Torah doesn't allow them to do. Should this person be on a college campus? No. Should this person be walking down the street and walking past every non-kosher restaurant that has the smell of their food deliberately wafting out to the street to attract people? No. This person might need to say, you know what? I want to keep Torah and mitzvahs. This is a priority for me. I just have an extraordinary weakness. And I am going to sit in the yeshiva all day and study. Not because they're saying this is right and going out there is wrong, right? The same way that in general, and maybe this is actually a very good metaphor, and then we're going to have to move on and tie things up. In general, is it a good idea for your average regular person, you have a baby, the newborn, should you isolate them and don't let them go outdoors and don't let them be exposed to different people because maybe there's germs and don't let them eat any food? No, and that was a mistake that people used to make, and the data have become very clear that the more foods a baby is exposed to and the younger they are when they're exposed to it, the less allergies they're likely to have. Right? The more a baby is protected from exposure to any germs, the less developed their immune system is and the more sick they're likely to get later on in life. Right? So it's generally a good thing as long as they're not overloaded. And you're obviously not going to take an infant or an 8-month-old baby and dump them in a room full of really sick people on purpose, obviously. But you also don't want to hide them from any germs anywhere and keep them super sanitized, because if you do, you're going to have to do that forever, and you can't keep that up. Right? It's not healthy. It's healthy to let them go outside and play and be around people. And that being said, you might have someone who has a particular condition, a compromised immune system or something else, where you know what, this person kind of has to live in a bubble for the rest of their life. Is that healthy for most people? Not at all. But for this person, it's a necessity. Right? And every one of us has those things in our life where we have to say, you know what, maybe most people can expose themselves to this and it's fine. For me, I personally can't afford exposure to that thing, and I have to protect myself to a degree that I agree it wouldn't be healthy for most people. I agree most people shouldn't protect themselves that much from this thing, but I have to. Right? So it's a very complex issue with a lot of different moving parts, but I would say that's the briefest sort of version of justice that we could do to it. It was a little less brief than I intended, but I don't think I could have done it in shorter. So now, back to this. You know, maybe, okay, we're going to zoom through the Shabbos thing, because the Shabbos thing was sort of the thing that I was going to do if we had time, and we were going to have time, and now we don't. So, but basically on Shabbos, we're not going through the world and its terms and the natural way of operating in order to integrate divinity into the world. How do we do it on Shabbos? We daven, we learn Torah, we spend time with other people, thinking about, talking about what's truly important to us. It's like direct, pure nutrition. We don't have to go through the whole process of work to get to the spiritual nutrition, to get to uplifting the world. On Shabbos, during the week, right, if you want to eat let's say, and yes, with all the fine print and all the objections and things, whatever, right? If someone enjoys a good steak and they want to eat a good steak during the week, and in doing so to integrate divinity into the world and uplift that food, they have to be doing it for the right reason. They have to be doing it, let's say, generally, primarily, in order to get nutrients which they will use to do the right things. Perhaps a person says, you know what, I'm just feeling a bit burnt out and I just really, you know, I need to enjoy something just to, you know, get me my energy back, and this is something that I enjoy and it's really going to pick me up. And it's a person who's, you know, devoted to the right things, and this pick me up for them is really going to get them back in the swing. That would be another reason. They're not thinking about the metabolic nutrition, you know, the molecular nutrition, but they're thinking about let's say, the well-being nutrition. It's going to pick them up and get them back into things. That would be another way that they're eating that food and uplifting it and elevating and integrating divinity into it. If a person one Wednesday afternoon just says, you know what, I feel like a really good steak sounds delicious, yeah, let me go for it. Honestly, like, all things considered, it may or may not be the best thing for me to eat, but it just sounds so delicious, I'm going to go eat it. Kosher, legit, make a bracha, okay. But you can't really say that, I mean, they've uplifted it to a degree by making a bracha, but there's a lot of calories in that food that have not been elevated. On Shabbos, if you eat food and you enjoy it, you have elevated that food, because there's a mitzvah to enjoy food on Shabbos. And this is exactly the point. On Shabbos, we're not allowed to plow the field. We're not allowed to sow grain. We're not allowed to harvest. We're not allowed to do all that hard work. We're not allowed to grind things and sort things and all of that. Because on Shabbos, the whole idea of Shabbos is integrating divinity into the world directly without all of that secondary stuff. When you eat food on Shabbos, and that's also why there's a mitzvah to enjoy good food on Shabbos. If you eat good food on Shabbos, you uplift that food just by enjoying the good food. You don't have to start having other noble intentions and reasons. Doesn't matter. Enjoy the food, you did a mitzvah, because that's Shabbos. Shabbos is pure divinity without having to go through all of that secondary stuff. Just like the man was pure nutrition that didn't require all of that work just to get it ready to eat. If a person eats without saying a bracha, then, on Shabbos you're talking about? That's a good question. I would think probably you just have two different things going on at the same time. They fulfill the mitzvah of enjoying the food. They have transgressed the obligation to make a mitzvah, to make a bracha. I don't know that one negates the other necessarily. Now, where we're really going with this is, right, what's supposed to be the primary objective of food? The primary objective of food is supposed to be to give us, number one, two things I would say, to give us nutrients, right? Nutrients have a number of uses. Nutrients are used to give us energy, right? We extract calories because we need energy to do anything. Nutrients are there to give us the molecules that we need to process things and to live and to do what we have to do. And food gives us the building blocks from which we construct person. Right? If you look at a newborn baby, an infant baby, if you look at the amount of food a healthy baby eats relative to their body weight, it's astronomical relative to if we all ate relative to our body weight, what a newborn baby eats relative to their body weight. Let's say that a newborn baby that weighs a handful of pounds is eating several ounces multiple times a day. If an adult weighs 10 times that, we shouldn't be eating 30, 40 ounces of food every couple of hours throughout the day. It wouldn't be that good for most people, let's say. Why do babies need to eat so much relative to that? Because they're growing. Their body's becoming bigger. When a baby goes from 7 pounds to 8 pounds, where did that extra pound of baby come from? It came from the food they ate. They ingested food, it got broken down, their body used some molecules to get energy, some molecules to do different things, and some of those molecules, it took protein and it took fat and it used it to actually build new body, new tissue, new cells, new person. We are literally, when they say you are what you eat, it's meant sort of as an expression, but it's literally true. Our bodies are physically constructed out of molecules we obtained by eating food. So food is there to give us the energy we need and actually for our bodies to be constructed out of it. And as always, our body and our soul are equivalent, right? There is no person without a body, there is no person without a soul. And as long as a person is alive, the body and the soul are not really two separate things. The body and the soul are two components of this composite entity known as a person. Person being a composite of body and soul together, working together. And the body and the soul are designed to work together. And they have equivalent systems. The body is physical, the soul is non-physical. And pretty much more or less all the things that are true of the body and the way it works, there's a non-physical equivalent that's true of the soul and how it works. It's true of exercise, it's true of all these different things, and it's true of nutrition. The same way that a body needs calories obtained from healthy food sources, the body needs vitamins, the body needs building blocks for making food, it needs proteins, it needs healthy fats, etc. The soul needs the same thing. The soul needs nutrients. Now, what is the food of the soul? What is the source of nutrition for the soul? What is something that we can actually take and put into the soul that will be a source of nutrition for it? In Tehillim, David HaMelech says, "V'soirascha b'soich me'er," and your Torah is in my innards. Your Torah is in my gastrointestinal tract, metaphorically meaning my spiritual gut. Your Torah is the source of nutrition for my soul. It goes into the stomach of my soul. And the same way that we have with food, right? And let's say we're not talking about a standard American diet. We're talking about a very, very carefully curated, nutritious diet. And what that looks like is a whole nother can of worms. We're not going to go there because we'll have more opinions than people in the room. But let's say if there was a hypothetical, objective, perfectly nutritious diet. It has everything that a person needs. It doesn't have anything that they shouldn't be eating. It's got exactly the right amount of calories, exactly the right amount of all the macros, exactly the right amount of each micronutrient, a hypothetical perfect diet. There's still going to be preparation involved. We're still going to have to chew. We're still going to have to swallow. There's still going to be digestion involved. Our stomach's going to have to work, right? There's no such thing, let's leave that for the moment. But there's still going to be waste. Like, that's part of reality. As opposed to the man, which was the bread from heaven, it also gave us the nutrition we needed, but there was no waste. There was nothing that didn't belong there. and there wasn't all of this processing necessary. Right? When we chew food, the reason that we chew food, we might feel like the point of chewing is just in order to be able to swallow, but there's a lot more going on when we're chewing food than just that. When we chew food, we're breaking it down to make it more digestible. We're mixing it with enzymes and other things that are in our saliva that that prepare the food to be broken down further in the stomach, etc. Chewing is actually part of the process of breaking down the food so we can extract the nutrients that we need from it. And then our stomach is, people think of a stomach as just sort of this room where the food goes. There's a lot going on in the stomach, and there are all kinds of different things, and the pH has to be perfectly balanced, and there are systems, the stomach has to be protected from the acid, and there are things in place to keep the acid at perfect levels and other things going on. So there's a lot of work happening. And then, the rest of the gastrointestinal tract, it's busy and it's working and there are things going on. There's a huge amount of work that goes into processing food, which is why, for many people, what happened? Oh well, too bad. Which is why for many people, a lot of people get tired after eating. Now, yes, it depends on what we eat and how much we eat, etc., but it's a real thing. As opposed to the man, all of that wasn't necessary. I'm not saying that they didn't chew in order to break it down and swallow it, but all of this work wasn't necessary because there was no waste to be extracted. There was nothing there that wasn't exactly the way it was supposed to be. Goes in, gets absorbed, bingo, you're good. The same way that this is true of food for our bodies, that there's food of the world and food from heaven, when it comes to Torah also, there is, most of Torah is, let's say, Torah of the world. There's a lot of, for every halacha, if you open a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which is the concise code of Jewish law, you open up, it says, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. For every statement, do this, in the big Shulchan Aruch, there's probably a bigger statement, and then there's commentaries and debates on that. Before you get there, there's the Tur that has a much longer conversation because he involves more of the opinions that came in the debate earlier. You go back to the Gemara and you have pages and pages, sometimes and pages of debate that went there just to get to this conclusion that you read in one line in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And on those pages and pages of Gemara, on each line of that Gemara, sometimes you'll have pages and pages of commentary and debate between them. Right, so to get to something in Torah regular, there's debate, there's back and forth, there's hard work. When it comes to Torah from heaven, what's called Pnimius HaTorah, perhaps referred to least incorrectly in English as mystical part of the Torah, Kabbalah Chassidus, that's like the man. 100% pure nutrition. There's no debating, there's no working it out, there's no grinding and separating and winnowing and plowing and sowing, all of that. It's 100% pure. You put it in, it will, 100% of it will be absorbed and it will give you what you need. There's nothing in there that's not good for us. There's nothing in there that we don't need. And the fact is, coming back, to bread from the earth, from natural food, if it's a matter of fact, right? You can't compare across people because there's a lot of varying factors across people. People have different genetics, etc. As a matter of fact, any person who is eating a standard American diet, who makes a change and shifts to eating a very nutritious diet is 100% guaranteed, as a matter of fact, to have a drastic change in their well-being. Guaranteed. It's not up for debate, it's not a question, it's a matter of fact. Exactly what the difference will be will vary from person to person, but any given person who makes that change, as a matter of fact, will experience an extraordinary shift in their well-being, in their quality of life, etc. If a person, can eat the man, if a person gets 100% pure nutrition, no waste, perfect, hypothetically, think about the impact that's going to have. And this was true in the desert. That's why it says that the Torah was given specifically to the generation that ate the man, because that gave them this pure nutrition. Even the people who had to grind and they had to travel to get their man, they still got the same nutrition out of it. They were still able to stand at Har Sinai and receive the Torah. It has that effect guaranteed on everyone. The effect on me isn't the same as the effect on you. First of all, we're starting out in different places. Second of all, we have different genetics. Third of all, one person might be doing more exercise and another one less, so they're going to get different amounts of benefit, but everyone will benefit. Anyone who learns Pnimius HaTorah, who gets this pure, 100% unadulterated, pure nutrition without any waste that doesn't require processing, every single person will 100% benefit as a matter of fact as a result of that. Will the benefit, the change, look the same for everyone? No. Right? Some people will have to learn more than others, maybe. Maybe some people will see the change more rapidly than others, but it's guaranteed for everybody. Any given person who gets that nutrition will see a change. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. So interesting.
You're welcome. Baruch Hashem.
After school.
I think it's like usually. So when you make like the commentary and everything, it's not that it's like waste, but like it's the process. You have to work hard.
Correct.
Okay.
So, in a sense, it's all part of Torah and it's all sacred. If you're looking at it from a very functional perspective, which is, I need to know what to do, it's like all of that doesn't really help you know what to do. Just go to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
So, and yes, it's true that there's a difference. In Hebrew you say, Ein hamashal doma v'nimshal. There's a breakdown between the analogy there and what it's an analogy for, because yes, that's correct. It doesn't translate exactly. Because in food there's actual waste, and in Torah there isn't. But yes.